Hey, how's it going everyone? Today I'm going to go over a few of the Elemental Enhancement Shaman talent builds I've been using for Raid and Mythic Plus. We'll start out by going through what I consider to be core nodes in the talent trees, and by core nodes I mean the nodes that we will be taking across all talent setups, and then we'll get into the more specific setups. Let's start off here with the Shaman talent tree. This is going to be pretty straightforward as this isn't going to vary much between builds. The nodes in yellow are our core nodes, and the two marks in blue, Chain Lightning and Maelstrom Weapon, are given to enhance by default. Most of the nodes we pick up here will be small damage increases, extra durability for ourselves, as well as group utility spells. On the first row, we start off by taking Lava Burst. This is a nice single target damaging spell and is of course affected by Maelstrom Weapon. Plus, if we take Elemental Blast in the enhancement tree, this will be replaced but provide Elemental Blast with 2 charges. And then we pick up our damage reduction ability Astral Shift. Below that, we take a point into either Plains Traveler, which increases Astral Shift's duration and reduces its cooldown, or Astral Bulwark, which causes Astral Shift to reduce damage by an additional 15%. Generally, Plains Traveler is the preferred option here in most situations. If you are running into a boss that does a large burst of damage that is infrequent, then Astral Bulwark may be the better option though. To the left of that is our Interrupt Wind Shear, and then Earth Elemental is next to that. Earth Elemental can act as a defensive because it does increase our max HP by 15% while it's alive. Back on the right side of the row, we have Frost Shock, which is a core part of our DPS rotation in most builds thanks to Ice Strike and Hailstorm, which we will talk about when we get to the enhanced tree. The next row down, the only core node is Fire and Ice, which is a % damage increase. Continuing down the left side, we have Ancestral Defense, which is a % increase to Leech and Avoidance that leads into both Elemental Warding, which is a % reduction to all magic damage taken, and a choice node between Wind Rush Totem and Earth Grab Totem. Wind Rush Totem will be the most commonly taken, especially in raid scenarios, to provide your groups with move speed to avoid mechanics, but Earth Grab Totem can be useful in some places, such as catching the ad during the first boss of Knock-Hut Offensive, or snaring sentries in Court of Stars. Below those is Nature's Guardian, which is a nice durability talent that heals us for 10% of our max health when our health drops below 35% on a 45-second cooldown. Below that, we take 2 points in Improved Lightning Bolt for a 20% damage increase to Lightning Bolt, and then we take Healing Stream Totem and Swirling Currents in order to get to Ancestral Guidance, which is a nice utility spell that can heal yourself and nearby party members. Jumping to the right side of the tree, below Maelstrom Weapon, we have Flurry, which increases our attack speed by 15% for our next 3 melee swings after dealing a critical strike. This ends up having a very high uptime and contributes to us getting procs, and the Nature's Fury talent below it pairs well by increasing our crit chance with nature spells. Next we have Brimming with Life, which causes Reincarnation to cool down faster, and when it's off cooldown, our max health is increased by 8%. And to the left of that, we have Winds of Alakir, which gives us a boost to Ghost Wolf's movement speed and leads into a choice node between Spirit Walk and Gust of Wind. Spirit Walk is a movement speed increase that removes snares on a 1-minute cooldown, and Gust of Wind is a knock forward on a 30-second cooldown similar to Goblin's Rocket Jump. I generally prefer Spirit Walk, but either one is a good choice. And that's going to round out the Shaman tree core nodes. Let's switch over to the enhancement tree. This being the elemental build, our focus is going to be around buffing up Lava Lash as well as talents improving Maelstrom Weapon damage and stack generation. First things we pick up here are 2 of our main rotational abilities in Storm Strike and Lava Lash, as well as Wind Fury Weapon. Then, in the next row, we take Molten Assault to reduce the cooldown of Lava Lash and cause it to spread Flame Shock to nearby targets. And also in this row, we put 2 points into Improved Maelstrom Weapon to increase the damage or healing of our spells affected by Maelstrom Weapon by 20%. This leads to Raging Maelstrom, which allows Maelstrom Weapon to stack up to 10 and further increases the damage or healing of spells affected by Maelstrom Weapon by an additional 5%. Sticking to the middle of the tree here, we then have Overflowing Maelstrom, allowing our spells to consume up to 10 Maelstrom Weapon stacks, and to the left of that is Sundering, which is an AoE damaging knockdown. Back to the right side of the tree, we have a choice node between Hailstorm and Fire Nova. Hailstorm causes our consumed Maelstrom Weapon stacks to give us Hailstorm stacks that increase our next Frost Shock's damage by 15% per stack and cause Frost Shock to hit up to 5 additional targets. Fire Nova, on the other hand, causes a burst of fire damage from all of the targets affected by our Flame Shock and can hit up to 6 targets. Both of these are good AoE options, with Fire Nova performing better at that 6 target cutoff and Hailstorm performing better at less targets. We'll always take one of these talents though due to pathing within the tree. Next we go Swirling Maelstrom, which causes Hailstorm, Ice Strike, and each Fire Nova explosion to generate a Maelstrom weapon stack, And to finish off this row, we have our main proc Hot Hand, which gives Flame Tongue weapon attacks a chance to reduce the cooldown of Lava Lash by 60% and increase its damage by 20% for 8 seconds. Next row down, the only core node we have is Ashen Catalyst, which causes our Flame Shock ticks on targets to increase the damage of our next Lava Lash by 12% and reduce its cooldown by half a second. This is awesome in AoE situations because of how quickly it does stack up. And then we have Lashing Flames, which causes lava lashes on our targets to increase the damage of Flame Shock by 100% for 20 seconds. In single target, this is a nice damage increase we don't need to worry about because it will just naturally be maintained during our rotation. But in AoE scenarios, we do need to cycle lava lash targets in order to maintain this debuff on as many targets as possible. Also in this row is Elemental Weapons, which is a 5% damage increase to all fire, frost, and nature damage, which then leads into Primordial Wave. Primordial Wave causes your next lightning bolt to hit all targets affected by Flame Shock for increased damage, which is obviously fantastic in AoE scenarios, but even in single target, this can hit like a truck. Primal Maelstrom is a 2-point talent that causes Primordial Wave to generate 10 stacks of Maelstrom weapon when used, and Splintered Elements below that causes each lightning bolt generated by Primordial Wave to increase our haste by 10%. Back over to the center, we have our main cooldown, Feral Spirits, and below that we have Witch Doctor's Ancestry, which increases our chance to gain a stack of Maelstrom weapon by 2%, and more importantly, every Maelstrom weapon stack we gain, the cooldown of Feral Spirits is reduced by 1 second. And lastly, we have Elemental Spirits, which causes our Feral Spirits to be imbued with fire, frost, or lightning, increasing our damage with that element by 20% while the wolves are active. Alright, that covers all of our core nodes. Let's branch these out into finalized builds. We'll start off with our raid setups. There are 2 main setups I'm going to cover. First is going to be a single target focused build with some cleave. This is going to work for most fights in the raid. Let's start off with the enhancement tree. I've already filled in some of the core nodes at the top that we already went over. We'll start off by talking about the choice node between Hailstorm and Fire Nova. Like I said before, Hailstorm performs better with less targets than Fire Nova does, so with this being a single target focused build, we will be taking Hailstorm here. And we will also take Ice Strike to the left of Hailstorm. Ice Strike increases the damage of our next Frost Shock by 100%, so generally anytime we run Hailstorm, we will also be taking Ice Strike because they pair so well together. This also helps our Maelstrom weapon stack generation because of the Swirling Currents talent below. And then we have Wind Fury Totem, which causes nearby party members to have a 20% chance to swing an extra time on man-hand weapon auto attacks. This is going to be a must-have for raid, unless for some reason you're the only melee in your raid, but that's pretty unlikely. From here, we can go ahead and fill in the rest of our core nodes on the right side: Hot Hand, Ashen Catalyst, and Lashing Flames. Now back to the left side of the tree, we want to path towards Elemental Blast, and taking Storm's Wrath is the most efficient way to get there. Storm's Wrath simply increases our chance to trigger Wind Fury weapon and Stormbringer procs by 150%, and now we can take a point in Elemental Blast, which is a incredibly strong single target spell that will also give us a buff to our haste, mastery, or critical strike chance for 10 seconds. This does replace Lava Burst, but because we will always be taking a point in Lava Burst, Elemental Blast will have 2 charges. And from here, we can simply fill in the rest of our core nodes to round out the tree. The setup will work for almost all of the bosses in the raid, including Aranog, Sinarth, Taros, Dathia, Kurog, and Razagath. This can also work on Broodkeeper Diurna, depending on what your raid has you doing. If they have you focusing the boss most of the time, then this build should work well. However, if you are more focused on the ads, then the AoE build may be better for you. For the AoE build, we will still be running Hailstorm, Ice Strike, and Wind Fury Totem, but we are going to remove the points from Elemental Blast and Storm's Wrath. These points are going to move to Crash Lightning, which does a cleave in front of us, and if it hits multiple targets, it causes our Storm Strike, Lava Lash, and Ice Strike to also cleave targets in front of us for a portion of their damage. One thing to keep in mind is it's important to remember to position properly when using Crash Lightning due to the cleave being a cone in front of us. Our remaining point will then be placed in Crashing Storms, which increases Crash Lightning damage by 40% and causes Chain Lightning to jump to 2 additional targets. From here, we once again just fill in the rest of our core nodes to complete the tree. This build is good on Primal Council, and it can also be used on Broodkeeper Diurna if you are on ad duty and your groups are struggling to kill them fast enough. Okay, let's talk about the Shaman talent tree setup for raid. As I did before, I have already filled in all of our core nodes, which leaves us with 6 points left to fill in. First thing is to take either Spirit Walk or Gust of Wind. I almost always take Spirit Walk, but Gust of Wind can be useful on a fight like Dathia, where you're getting knocked in the air quite often, to help yourself land away from the tornadoes, or on a fight like Razageth, where you get blown to side platforms that cause falling damage. Gust of Wind can be used mid-air to kind of negate that damage. Then on the same row, I like to take Totemic Projection. This is an off GCD spell that moves our active totems to a new location. Because a lot of fights require movement, this spell helps us move Wind Fury Totem without needing to waste a GCD to place it again, at least while it's still active. And I personally have this macro to one of my rotational spells so that I always have Wind Fury moving with. Next, we take 2 points in Totemic Focus, which increases the range of our totem effects by 15% and also increases the duration of some of our totems like Healing Stream and Wind Rush by 3 seconds. At this point, we have 2 points remaining. For most fights, your best option is to put a point into Go With The Flow to reduce the cooldown of Spirit Walk by 7.5 seconds or Gust of Wind's cooldown by 5 seconds, and then put your remaining point into either Spirit Wolf or Thunderous Paws. Spirit Wolf causes Ghost Wolf to give us 5% increased movement speed and 5% damage reduction, which stacks up to 4 times. This can be good on a fight like Dathia when she uses Cyclone because it will give you some extra movement speed for getting sucked in and help reduce the dot damage she does during it. Thunderous Paws causes Ghost Wolf to remove snares and increase her movement speed by an additional 25%, but this can only occur every 60 seconds. This is especially good on a boss like Sinarth because Thunderous Paws will remove the sticky webbing debuff. Now, this setup will work in most situations, but do keep in mind that you may want to swap the last 2 points to Capacitor Totem or Guardian's Cudgel for Dathia if you're doing the fights on heroic difficulty or higher in order to stun the adds on the side platforms. Taking Purge on a boss like Razageth may also be useful in order to help clear out these sparks. Alright, that's gonna do it for our raid builds. Let's jump over to the Mythic Plus builds and look back at the enhancement tree. There are 3 main builds to cover, although they are all fairly similar. Once again, I've already gone ahead and filled out our core nodes at the top. Let's focus on the Hailstorm and Fire Nova choice node. For this build, we are going to be taking Hailstorm, which has been growing in popularity for Mythic Plus and is currently more commonly used than Fire Nova. The reasoning for this is, as I said before, Fire Nova performs well at that 5 or 6 target threshold, but below that, Hailstorm will perform just as good or even better than Fire Nova, especially when it comes to single target. And with the current set of Mythic Plus dungeons, a majority of the pulls are below that 6 target mark. And because we are running Hailstorm, we will also want to take Ice Strike to further buff up our Frost Shock damage. Now we can pick up core nodes below Hailstorm and then jump over to the middle to take Crash Lightning as well as Crashing Storms in order to give us more cleave damage. From here, we can fill in our remaining core nodes, which leaves us with 1 additional point. This can be dropped in one of 2 places. First, if you are running with other melee classes that benefit from Wind Fury Totem, then it may make sense to take Wind Fury Totem. Otherwise, the point is best taken in Elemental Assault, which will increase Storm Strike damage by 10% and give Storm Strike a 50% chance to generate 1 stack of Maelstrom weapon. Either one is a relatively minor gain to damage, so it won't affect much depending on what you take. And that's going to wrap up this build. Very similar to this though is an alternative version of the Hailstorm build that I've been liking to run for Tyrannical weeks, where we take Hailstorm and Ice Strike plus pick up Elemental Blast. In order to path over to Elemental Blast, we will need to change out 2 points. The first will be the point we put in Elemental Assault. We can drop this and move it to Storm's Wrath. The next point we will move is from Crashing Storms. You could also drop Swirling Maelstrom here instead, but I prefer to keep that for the Maelstrom weapon stack generation, as I think it works out better on single target. The rest of the build then stays the same, although if you are wanting to run Wind Fury Totem, you would need to drop Swirling Maelstrom as well. Finally, the last build we are going to go over is the Fire Nova build, and it's almost the same setup as what we have here already, but with Fire Nova instead of Hailstorm, and without Hailstorm, we will also drop Ice Strike and move that point to Crashing Storms. This build does good in AoE, especially at that 6 target mark where you can get the most out of Fire Nova, and because we take Elemental Blast, the single target damage of this build isn't too bad as well. The build also is a bit easier to play than the Hailstorm build in my opinion, but the Hailstorm build seems to be a bit better overall when played correctly. Lastly, let's look over to the Shaman talent tree for Mythic Plus. We once again start out by taking either Spirit Walk or Gust of Wind. Again, I like Spirit Walk, but this is mainly going to come down to personal preference. Then we definitely take a point in Capacitor Totem. Having an AoE stun for Mythic Plus is super nice to have, and then I like to top it off with Guardian's Cudgel, which causes a second Capacitor Totem to drop after the first one goes off. From here, we do want to take either Wind Rush Totem or Earth Grab Totem. Neither is too impactful in Mythic Plus, but as I mentioned before, Earthgrab will get you some value in a place like Knockout Offensive where you can snare the ad on the first boss. It's important to take one of these though to pick up Nature's Guardian. Next, we take Thunderstorm, which deals a small amount of damage to nearby enemies and knocks them back. This is great for Sanguine weeks to help move mobs out of pools to prevent them from healing, but if you don't need the knockback or it isn't a Sanguine week, then the Thunder Shock talent will cause Thunderstorm to knock up enemies instead. I've been using this more and more recently, and together with Capacitor Totem and Sundering, it sets us up to provide long CC chains. And to the left of this, we want to go ahead and pick up our core nodes down to Ancestral Guidance. Our last point is going to depend a bit on the content you're doing. Tremor Totem removes fears, charms, and sleeps from party members, and this can be good in Azure Vault or Algathar Academy, where some mobs can put you to sleep if not interrupted, or in Temple of the Jade Serpent, where some mobs can cause fear effects if not interrupted. Cleanse Spirit, which removes curses from friendly targets, is another option, although in the current set of dungeons, this is pretty niche. There are some healing absorbs you can decurse in Temple of the Jade Serpent to help out your healer, but outside of that, nothing major to use this on. Taking Spirit Wolf or Thunderous Paws can also be a good passive option if you are new to the class and feeling overwhelmed by the keybinds. Or the final and generally best option is to run Purge, because most of the current Mythic Plus dungeons have various mobs that we can purge shields off of. And that's going to do it for this video. All of the talent builds I went over will have import strings in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video.